about to hear a revolution in talk radio, Liberty Talk Radio, where the critical thinking will defrag your mind of propaganda-ridden viruses induced by mass media news programming. No BS here, just the facts.
And now we present to you America's quintessential iconoclastic anomaly. Wow. In talk radio, your host, Joe Cristiano.
Welcome, everyone, to Liberty Talk Radio, America's libertarian voice, broadcasting from our studio here in Oklahoma to around the world. I'm your host, Joe Cristiano, and this is your antidote to popular talk radio. Folks, it's time for us to take back control of our government now before this bureaucratic, oversized, and self-serving federal government starves us of our property, our freedom, our rights, and our liberty. But to do this, we must shed conventional thinking regarding our political structure. We need to be revolutionaries in thought, dissidents in action. Only after we recognize what our government is doing to our freedom and our Constitution will we start taking it back. And this program is just about that. Folks, just last week, I made mention in a podcast regarding the universal basic income. And typically, I don't follow it up with an addendum to it, but I just felt compelled to do this because I was watching the program on TED Talk. Now, TED Talk normally has some interesting people. There's no way to qualify whether or not they're lunatics or they're absolutely accurate in what they're saying, but they have some interesting people and, of course, some high-powered people, doctors and PhDs, to talk on certain subjects. And quite frankly, I watch it from time to time. This time they had someone that was quite unusual. It was a young man who apparently did some research, I guess. He had no particular qualifications that I can recall. But he talked about the need for universal basic income. Well, we know everybody and his brother and his dog is talking about that today, and it's such a wonderful thing. Why didn't we do this thousands of years ago? What took us so long? Well, his argument went something like this. There is a small, obscure town in India where this woman who is barely has subsistence to eat and to raise a family, was given some money. And with that money, she purchased a sewing machine. And after obtaining that sewing machine, she started to do some work in the village of sewing clothing and making clothing and whatever. And she slowly but surely worked her way out of this abject poverty. Now, she didn't become a multimillionaire. She wasn't investing in the stock exchange or anything like that. but she at least was able to generate some income. Now, we don't know how much income and how it affected her, but it did improve her status in life. Now, this gentleman on TED Talk, and I'm sorry I do not remember his name. I do not want to remember his name, quite frankly, because what I heard him talk about was garbage, absolutely. I mean, it was illogical. The whole thing was illogical. I was surprised they had him on, but he had a big audience, and he made a point that had it not been for this money that the government gave to her without any obligation for her to pay back, she was able to lift her family out of poverty. Well, maybe from abject poverty to higher level poverty or whatever, or less poverty. Well, I agree. But the world is not all like India. In India, there are people who have nothing at all. And if given the opportunity, if you gave them some money, you gave them an opportunity, they would work day and night, to secure their position in society using that money. Now, how do you compare that to a country such as the United States and most of Europe and most of South America, where there are welfare programs that if you do not have enough money, if you're on the lower tier of society financially, the government will supply you with money. And many people on government programs, quite frankly, do very well. Some do better than those working at minimum wage jobs or above. So we, in fact, have already a universal basic income. When you lose your job, you get unemployment for several months. And it's quite a big sum. I don't recall what it was. But my mentality is so different. When I I guess I was fired or retired or whatever you want to call it, from this company. That was the last company that I worked for, and I'm going back now near 30 years. I was given a little check, and they said, adios, goodbye. And I remember driving to my wife's office that I helped her open. She's an audiologist, and I helped open that office for her. And I passed by the unemployment office where I would pick up my check. And I couldn't do it. I was entitled to a pretty substantial sum. I was making pretty good money at the time. And I knew there would be no job for me because no one was going to pay the money that I was making at the age that I was. And the employment picture was quite glum at the time. So I decided to just head over to my wife's office and help her with her business. And I had helped somebody in another business and whatever, and I got involved in that. I never collected a dime. Now, I don't only tell you that story, not to say how great I am or look at, I want you to feel sorry for me, is that I think if I would have collected that money, I wouldn't have been the success that I became after losing my job with this large company. And I was making good money. I had a very, very good job. But I had to do it on my own. I couldn't have this backstop, this income coming in, and where I would get called out to go for job interviews and fake a job interview because I really didn't want the job in the first place. So I know, I understand the program, and I know why it's important for us to be independent, not to be withholding to our government. I became successful. The business that I was helping out with, I eventually took over because the fellow who started it just stopped working. He just literally stopped working. I bought the company from him. And it was an occupational health testing company. And today it's the largest occupational health testing company in the state of Oklahoma. I worked day and night, traveled all over the country. I mean, late at night, I worked 6-7 days a week, every week for 10, 15 years. And I turned over that company now to my son, who's doing an absolutely marvelous job. Never collected a dime from anyone. What I'm saying is that I don't want applause or anything like that. I said, I want you to know that we have to be driven to succeed. And if someone gives you money, you will not succeed. The proof of this is that when people are given money at a young age, do they become successful? No, they become lazy. When the government pays for the college education or finances the college education kids go to school, young people go to school. They graduate with degrees in worthlessness, right? Then they can't find a job and they go on unemployment and they live home with their moms and dads. But when people are given money by their parents, do the kids, the children, do they take that money and start a business? No. In most cases, not all cases, but in most cases, that is a dampener in their desire to dampen their desire to achieve something. Why achieve something when I'm getting something for nothing? Now, so many of our young people are home, living in their parents' basement, getting maybe a little stipend from their parents so they can do whatever they want to do or look for a job, which they don't do very well. So giving the people money does not equate to people achieving things. In fact, when you give money to people, that typically, not in every case, but typically dampens their desire to succeed. When I lost that job, I had to find work. I needed that income. I took over a company that was doing no business whatsoever, worked day and night, and became successful. When I think back of what I went through to make that company a success and being able to hand it over to my son, who works there, he's not given any money, he works the company, and if the company makes no money, he doesn't get paid. Maybe that's his incentive. That's what the American dream is all about. It's not the money, it's the opportunity. I wrote down some notes here. So this person who was on TED Talk, his logic was, well, if there wasn't this sort of mini universal income in India, this woman would still be poor. Thus, we should apply that same principle worldwide. Well, the situation in India does not exist in the United States. There's no one in the United States sitting in a hut, starving to death. No one. In fact, there are so many stories, and they're valid stories, by people who study this, who say that many people that are on the dole, the government dole, do better than people who are working entry-level jobs. So what is this universal basic income going to do? It's not going to lift the people. It's going to degrade the people, make them lazier than they are. It will force them to be lazy. Why work when I can stay home and get some money and have some fun and go out with Bobby tonight? We'll have a great time. So this talk about universal basic income, and every politician now is for it. They're not for it because it's logical. They're for it because it gets them votes. But the question that they never address is, who is going to finance it? They say, oh, we got all this money. We're a rich nation. No, we're not. We're broke. We're absolutely broke. We owe over $200 trillion. We're approaching $250 quadrillion in debt that we owe, the government owes. And there's no way that they can collect that money from us. There's not enough money in the world to do that. We could all work jobs, 3 jobs, never sleep, and we couldn't pay that off. So where is the money going to come from? They never answer that question. Oh, they give you some general statement saying, oh, don't worry. We'll do is we'll reduce this and we'll tax the rich and do this and do that. They got to be so damn stupid, it's disgusting. If I was wealthy and living in the United States And all of a sudden, my taxes went from whatever it is, 25 or 30% to 60%. Hey, I would leave. I would live in Puerto Rico where there's no federal income tax, or go to South America, Central America, and go someplace else where I would not be taxed. I would incorporate, if I had to, I would incorporate my businesses in another country, and they would be more than happy to take me. In other words, by forcing people who are productive to leave the United States, we wind up with a bunch of people who do nothing, who are waiting for someone to take a gamble to start a business so they can hire them. You don't want to lose the rich. You don't want to lose the entrepreneur. You don't want to lose those people who have the incentive to achieve, even if they never reach their goal. And I'm not saying they have to be like me. Hopefully they're better than me. But I've been very lucky and very fortunate, and yet I hit some real bumps. And instead of taking the easy way out, I took the very toughest way out. And it worked out beautifully. Now, did I have to work for it? You bet I did. And I say work, I mean day and night, 7 days a week. That's all I did. And now I have a thriving company where I can hire people, pay him a good wage. My son has a job. He's a musician, so we work sort of both places, you know. And he's doing a fabulous job. When you give money to people, you make bums out of them. They become lazy. They don't give people money and they go, oh, now I'm going to start a business. I'm going to work day and night. No, they're just going to take the money and think about going into business, hoping that the next check is larger than the prior one. Do we know of any country in the world that is rich because it gives money away to the population? I don't know of any. People reference the countries of Northern Europe, Sweden, places like that. And yet those countries don't do particularly well. They were doing well when they were free enterprise countries. Then they went to the socialistic side, like we're talking about, like we're going. And all of a sudden, people who were energetic, the unemployment rate was extremely low. You had kids hanging around the street doing nothing. And a drug problem. So it's not that we don't have examples and a history of what's been going on. We know what the end result will be. You cannot get money from someplace where it doesn't exist, give it to people who are unproductive, and expect society to be uplifted. That is impossible. But yet there's something wrong with the American mentality, where people actually believe that. They believe that if only the government did this, if only the government did that, how about if only you got off your ass and start working? No, we don't say that. But that's what the Constitution says you have to do. Because there's going to be no one there to help you out, although we broke the intent of the Constitution altogether. Everyone is absolutely free to follow the course that drives them to be successful in their life. And regardless of what your definition of successful is, some people make very little money but are very successful in what they do. Its success is not measured by the amount of money you make. And this is a problem, is that we actually think that money solves the problem. Money never solves a problem. Money can only hold you back. I really appreciate a person. I can't think of his name. He's one of the richest men in the world. Warren Buffett. Thank you. I just thought of it. Warren Buffett. Here's a man who, at one time, and I'm not sure if he still is, the standing changes constantly, was the second richest man in the entire world. And yet he still lives in a modest house that he bought 40 some odd years ago. He goes to work every day. When he flies, he doesn't do like our president does, gets in this gigantic jet with no one in it but himself and his bodyguards and girlfriends and whatever. But he goes and he buys a discount ticket and he sits in, not first class, in regular class. They say that what he does before he goes to a meeting, he stops at a fast food place like McDonald's, and has a bite to eat because it's less expensive than going to the hotel and paying a lot of money for a sandwich or whatever. And I know this from people that I've learned from, that the amount of money that they make, the real successful ones, don't change their behavior. They appreciate the dollar that they make today, although they may be multimillionaires or billionaires. They appreciate the dollar they make today just as much as they appreciated the dollar they made when they first started and didn't have a penny to their name. Now, I am 76 years old. I can't believe I'm this old. Many of my friends, unfortunately, had passed away for different reasons, mostly cancer and things like that. And I'm still saving money for a rainy day. But I know so many people who are so highly in debt. And they spend money like there's no tomorrow. I still count my pennies when I have change. I haven't changed a bit. I don't have to work. I want to work. And if I work and I don't make any money, that's fine also, if I elect to do that. But for all of these people coming out saying that we can solve all of our problems by giving money away, just look at our welfare program. What percentage of the people that are on welfare and have children after they have welfare, females I'm talking about, obviously, and males that should have married the woman that they had a child with, which are now away, if you gave both of them now separate incomes, that's free. You think that's going to bring them back together again? I don't think so. I think it'll make it worse. They'll say, hey, I don't have to worry about Susie there that I got pregnant and all that, and I should be taking the responsibility. She's getting money from the government. Boy, I'm off the hook. Universal basic income doesn't work because it's proven not to work. Look at our welfare program. That's a universal basic income for those people under a certain income level or no income level. That are these people being catapulted out of poverty because they're on welfare? No, a vast majority are on welfare. They have housing now. I lived in Harlem. I was a Harlem kid. I sang doo-wop back in the 50s. Would you believe that? And I wasn't a prejudiced guy. I was the only singing group in New York back in the late 50s that had a black lead and a Puerto Rican second tenor. I used to sing first tenor mostly. So I appreciate that. I hung around. I moved to the Bronx. I used to visit the South Bronx, the East Bronx, the West Bronx, Prospect Avenue, Simpson Street. Anyone who knows New York, those two words are poison. They're tough neighborhoods. That's the neighborhoods that I hung around in. So I knew poverty. There was poverty all over the place. Giving money to people didn't take them out of poverty. It ensured that they stayed there. And a universal basic income will ensure that the United States stays in poverty and at the same time go broke, and we will all suffer the consequences. There is no good in universal basic income. There is really no good in welfare. And not that I'm mean, but before welfare, the local church would collect money for Mrs. So-and-so whose husband unfortunately passed away or got killed or whatever in an accident. And the neighborhood took care of her. And then she would start a business in her home. My grandmother used to do embroidering at home. But with all the government regulations, you can't do that. You need a license to do this. So you got to comply with government, city ordinances and whatever. You get the government involved. You give the government taking money from the productive and give to the unproductive. And you know what you get? You get a universal basic income with fewer people working and less productivity. And the standard of living of the entire country goes down the tubes. Folks, if you disagree with me, send me email to comments@libertytalkradio.com. I'd love to hear from you. And I think that's about all I have to say about that subject. You can find me on YouTube. You can make comments, on, I don't even know if I have a Twitter account anymore or whatever. It's been long since I've even looked at it, But I really wish that we would become more critical. We would think more. Think. I hire students, I hire young men in my company, and they've gone to school because the government gave them money, of which they have to pay back. They have a small amount would be $44,000 that they owe, and they're making maybe $15 an hour or something like that. It can't happen. They're never going to pay back. And what do? And they become teachers. They're not qualified to become teachers, but it's the only job that they can find. And so we perpetuate this ring of poverty. Anyway, I can go on for another hour. I think I'll shut it off now. I want to thank you so much for tuning in, and I hope to put out a couple of YouTubes every week, on certain subjects. And I'd love to hear from you, okay? And this is the end of today's broadcast. We'd like to thank everyone for listening in, and we'd like to thank our sponsors for their financial support. You can show your faith in liberty by recommending to this program to your friends, and let us hear from you. Our email address is comments@libertytalkradio.com. All right? Good night, good day, and hopefully hear from you soon.